All right, can I have your attention, please? Good evening, everyone in person and those of you who are online, and thank you for coming along. As we get things underway, can I please ask Stephen Coghill here to tell us about this country we are on, and also give those people online an opportunity to reflect on the country that they're on. Over to you, Stephen. Thank you
very much, Kerrie. Appreciate that. Cheers. Good evening, everybody. My name's Stephen Coghill Jr. I'm a Gurrumple, Yagarapu, Gubby Gubby descendant man on my mother's father's side. This here country is part of the Yagarapu country. On my great side, Laminda, also known as Daisy Thompson. She's the Yagarapu, on the western part of the Yagarapu. That started from, say, around here, just over the catchment way over here, and then Gurrumple was from North Australia, South Australia, Southern Islands, right up to here, Upuru and Tennyson. So part of the city as well. So all part of the Honourable Yagarapu people language. Also, dad's mum's mother's side. Gubby people, Gurrumple. That land is off the South Pine River, starts at parts of the north side of Brisbane, coastline, up to the sunny coast there, all right down to Butcher stuff. All the way west out towards Yagara, also goes right out towards Boomba Ranges there, Gatton, stuff down to Jacobs Well. So, all part of that. Awesome Yagara Nation. I'd like to first of all give a traditional welcome in the Honourable Yagarapu language, and then I'll give you an interpretation. And then I'd also like to give you the significance of welcome to country. There's been a lot of confusion and convolution between what it means. That is it a modern thing or is it ancient? But I'll get to that. But like right now, I just want to start with our traditional welcome, what we say. Then I'll do an interpretation. Okay. So thank you very much. Thank you again, Kerrie, for inviting me. I'm here on behalf of my dad who couldn't make it, so I'm the better version. So without further ado, Yoa Mamale Malara. Yoanga. Yoa Navipatara Yagarapu Malara. Dara. Har. Aripa, Burma Murumba, Ping, Raya, Yakana, Pandara, Guba, Gula, Guloa, Gudla, Aripa, Dara, Naga, Paranawa, Yakala, Gulka, Pandara, Guba, Gula, Guloa. Aiba, Stephen Coghill. Aripa Malara, Oanpa, Tarangare Jara, Panamuka, Oan. Aripa Yagarapu, Maganja, Rumba Maganja Jara. Aripa Kabika, Udampi, Ningi, Jara, Yoa. Aripa Beran, Hadna. Yoa, Yoangan, Aripa Yagarapu Malara. Aripa Marumba Nyuru, Oakuan Tukaliwa, Mamale Malara, Yoa. Good evening, everybody. People. First of all, I give respect and honor to God, Creator, Father in the sky, who made us, who gave us a culture. Made us strong forever. Secondly, respect and honour to our elders, past, present, forevermore. Paved the way for us, made us strong for today. My name's Stephen Coghill, descendant of the Gurrumple people of North Australia, Karlien, Monamuka. Descendant of the Yagarapu Brisbane, Greater Brisbane area. Logan, Ipswich, parts of the north side. So part of the Gubby people, Udambi lands and the Ningi lands. This here is my father's country. On behalf of the Yagabo people, I hereby welcome you all in love, respect, and good spirit. Business this evening. Just like to tell you what the significance of welcome to country. It isn't just a tokenistic thing that Peter Beattie made up many years ago. The ancestors would travel, festivals for ceremony. And you had to go through country. Now, despite what you may have heard, not only did the land own us, we did own the land. We have that boundaries, and if you trespass with that, you went through those boundaries, trespass with that permission, there were serious consequences. So what the ancestors would do, say for example, the Bunya festival, which was an ancient festival that used to get held so often at the Bunya Mountains, Waka country, Waka Waka. We would have to go through different lands, country, and you'd come to that boundary, you'd make a fire, get their attention, they'd come out and say, hey, how you going, what's up? Yeah, we want to cut through, we can. Got some gifts here for you. Welcome us through the country, and sometimes they would let them. Sometimes they couldn't because there was a ceremony on, or sometimes, all right, we can travel together, we're heading our way too. And they'd be like a treaty together. Exchanges of gifts, language, whatever. And that's how the significance of welcome to country came about in the old ways. Fast forward to the 20th century and then 21st century, and then in that same principle, the old ways, the principles of the old ways still there, but it's been modified to this today. And this is why we do the welcome to country. I'd like to give my honours and respects to all the ancestors in the southeast, starting with Green, Waka Waka, Gubby Gubby, Yagarapool people, Yilgan Bear, Bunjala, all part of that southeast project. Traded and exchanged and gifts and welcome to countries with each other. Exchanged, had marriage ceremonies and patterns within each other and stuff like that. And it's still significant today. And it means something to everyone. In the spirit of reconciliation, if we are to be reconciled in this country between Indigenous and non-Indigenous, then there has to be that form of respect. The old ways must come together with the new ways. Shake hands, work together rather than against each other. So that's the significance of the welcome to country. I hope you enjoyed that. I want to welcome you all, part of my Yagara ancestors, ancestry group, that we got people, Yagara country, where we are now. So to send you that love, respect, and good spirits, and I hope you enjoy your lecture big time. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you for patiently listening. Cheers. You're most welcome.
Thanks for that, Stephen. And for mine, I think it's important too to acknowledge, how lucky we are to be here, and for people who aren't First Nations, just how grateful I am, and we all are every day to be here. So thank you for sharing that.
Anytime. Love sharing culture. I love educating. I don't know everything. I don't think anyone does. So it's all part of the learning journey too. My elders teach me, then they say, get out there now and teach, show others. Respect, honourable thing for them. And show you guys as well today. So that we're in the journey together and stuff. Awesome. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right. Enjoy your evening, guys. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So for those of you that don't know, my name is Kerrie Foxwell-Norton, and I'm an associate professor at working in the area of environmental and climate change communication, media and journalism. I'm a member of the Griffith Centre for Social and Cultural Research, and especially relevant tonight, a theme leader in the Griffith Climate Action Beacon. The Griffith Climate Action Beacon is a $5 million strategic research initiative, and we are now in our third year. We are led by our director, Professor Brendan Mackey, and joined by around 100 Griffith academics and their partners in what is a meaningful, interdisciplinary research and cross-sectoral practice hub for climate action. Our goal is to support knowledge, leadership and capacity to build effective and just responses to the climate crisis. The Climate Action Beacon has two core arms, Climate Action Beacon Research and the Climate Ready Initiative. The Climate Ready Initiative is a resource for industries, governments and organisations seeking support in transitioning themselves and their practice in light of climate change impacts, opportunities and challenges. Tonight you will hear about two capstone projects supported by the Climate Action Beacon, the National Climate Action Survey, led by Associate Professor Graham Bradley, who isn't here tonight, and Associate Professor Samir Deshpande, who is here tonight, and Dr. Karlien Paas. And you'll also be hearing about the Big Data Analytics Dashboard, which is led by our own Professor Bela Stantic, who is here this evening. Touch me in with that. I thought I'd frame this event and begin creatively and respectfully to First Nations people present and on the unceded lands where we all meet by sharing this photo. Taken by me in October 2022 while visiting Wilcannia and spending time with the Barkinji mob and on the banks of this river, the Barker or Darling, that flows through their country and was then in flood. These floodwaters brought good news for local people. All the water politics of the region temporarily abated as the river flowed over dams and weirs, bringing fish, happy families and young people, reigniting cultural practice, bringing life and culture. In stark contrast, where I live on the glens of the Coghill people of the Bundjalung Nation, far northern New South Wales, floods produce a far different response and indeed a different set of images of devastation, despair and fear, the cascading and compounding impacts which continue to this very day. Brisbane, Meanjin, on these lands of the Turrbal and Jagera people, is no stranger to the devastation of extreme flooding, telling again distinctive stories of climate change impacts and events. Here, I begin to emphasise the distinctiveness of local impacts of climate changes, including and far, far beyond emergency, disaster and these acute moments, and how important nuance is to understanding experiences and guiding local, national and global responses to its challenges and opportunities. I was fortunate to be there in February 2022 in northern New South Wales and then in Wilcannia in October of 2022, and I grew up in Brisbane. But being there is not usually possible, and so the feedback from individuals and communities is difficult to grasp, let alone coordinate into accessible and useful information. And in a country as geographically and culturally diverse as Australia, it's a challenge to know how Australians in all their diversity are thinking about and responding to climate changes. And so to help inform policy and decision making, we have our two projects that individually and together shed light on Australians and climate action. I'll shortly invite our Climate Action Survey leads, Karlien and Samir, to give you a taste of the National Climate Action Survey findings. Bela will follow, some summary remarks from our Brendan Mackey, and then questions afterwards, and then for the lucky few that are here, the lucky many that are here, some refreshments. You'll be receiving quite a lot of information and we are keen for your questions too. Many people are joining us online, so please do, if you're online, please do put your questions in the chat as soon as you like, because we'll be collating those as the night rolls on. And if we don't get to your questions tonight, we'll be answering via email or via, direct contact, or please reach out. So over to you, Samir and Karlien.
Thank you very much, Kerrie. I wish, Kerrie, I was as eloquent as you are in your introductory remarks. Thank you very much for attending today's event, both offline and online. So it is a great pleasure for us, having spent many weeks together, me, Graham, and Karlien, to put together this survey, collecting data, analyzing it, and reporting it to you all. I must thank Kerrie, Natasha, and Brendan for giving us the much needed intellectual as well as administrative support to bring together this project. So the objective for today is to share our findings from what we call the most ambitious climate change survey ever taken place in Australia. We will be primarily presenting you the findings from 2022 round, which was collected late 2022. However, we will compare those with our round one of the survey. And of course, the second objective is to initiate dialogue so that we are able to interact on these important issues and come up with ways to inform policy and practice. And so in our presentation, me and Karlien will provide you with the foundational knowledge of what the survey was about, provide you a very snapshot of findings. Our policy summary report and technical report will be released in next 15 days and will be available on Griffith Climate Action Beacon website. And of course, we will educate you about the future steps we are going to take in the next few days. All right, so in terms of aim, before we go into the actual aims, I do want to highlight why we consider this to be the most ambitious of the climate change surveys ever taken in Australia. Because in terms of sample size, methodological rigor, the number of disciplines represented in the survey, and the expanse of the concepts that we have looked at, we believe that nobody has done this, at least in Australia so far. And in terms of the full sample of 2021 and the new sample of 2022, we will explain to you what we mean. We believe that our data, our sample represents Australians in terms of gender, age, and their residence by state and territories. The aim of the survey is to build and test theory. As academics, we are always driven to ensure that we contribute to the literature, but we are academics, which means that we just don't do research for the sake of publishing, but we do it so that it informs policy and practice. And so we hope that our data has a lot of insights that people can take home and form policies, create campaigns, create behavior change strategies, and use that to educate and inform the society. And so in that regard, we would like to answer questions, participate in any debate that we would have. In a nutshell, our survey represents these 6 main concepts, which in layman's language tries to capture what adult Australians know, think, feel, and do about climate change events and what they have experienced in the last couple of years. In terms of the actual questions, our survey included a whole host of questions which were capturing 30 multi-item scales of concepts and additional 185 items which were single items. And in the end, we had 5 open-ended questions. We will try to highlight some of those open quotes, which brings spice to life, because that actually gives you much more insight. As an Indian, of course, why would I not like spice in my survey as I like in my food? So in terms of survey administration, we collected data online with our help of Dynata, which is a multinational research company with offices in Sydney and Melbourne. We collected data from September to December. It took us 4 months of 22 because we were trying to first go to the 2021 respondents convince them to fill the survey again. This study is a 5-year study. The 2022 was round 2 of our 5-year study. So we tried to convince them to fill the survey again. However, only 31% of the respondents participated from 2021 sample. We had to fill in the remaining sample to reach our sample size of 4,000. So we invited new respondents who were to the tune of 2,767 individuals. And yes, all the answers were answered anonymously. So in a nutshell, this is our sample. As you can see, around 4,000 people in each year. In the second year, 31% of those were repeat sample from 2021. In terms of gender, you can see is almost equal, although we, I think, reached better equality in terms of gender in the second year. In terms of age, the average age was 46 years, which grew up to 49 years. That is because the repeat sample was on average 9 to 10 years older than our 2021 sample, as well as the national average. So older individuals chose to participate in the survey in the second year. And the second main point is, if you look at the experienced natural disaster in your life ever question, if you look at the repeat sample information, it was 73. They had experienced it to the tune of 73%, which means we got people who were older and had experienced natural disaster to the larger extent to participate in our survey. And we will show you later on how people who have experienced natural disaster tend to be more concerned about climate change and more willing to participate in pro-environmental behaviors. So we have to keep in mind this slightly biased sample, but overall the 2021 data and the new sample was representative of Australian population. With that in mind, I now invite Karlien to give us a summary of our findings.
Thank you, Samir. So yeah, I'm going to highlight a quick overview and some illustration of the findings that we found most striking and thought that would be interesting to all of you and could also inform some policy as well. So it's a large survey, so we will not go through everything today, but just some quick highlights to show you what kind of things we found and what we can look into as well. So before I can go into the findings, we have to know how Australians do define climate change. And that's a really tricky question in itself. Because if I were to ask you guys here or online, how do you define climate change and what do you think of climate change, I might get a lot of different answers. And that's exactly what we found in our survey. So the understanding of the meaning of the term climate change, you can see it's quite diverse answers, but they are stable over time between 2021 and 2022. And most people actually think that it's all changes in the world's climate, but they're not convinced about what's causing them. So it could be regardless of the cause, which is approximately 1/3, but there's other people who think it's only due to human activity or naturally occurring. So that's the whole difference in itself. And then there's also people who only think climate change is global warming, so an increase in temperature. And there's also a small percentage that says it does not really exist. So another question we asked is, do you believe climate change is real? We've measured this with multiple items, and we concluded that this year, 74% of the people actually think that it is a real thing. It's dropped down a little bit from last year, but pretty similar. The most astonishing finding is that 18% of the people is actually unconvinced. That doesn't mean they don't think it's real. It thinks they don't need immediate action straight away. So Samir will come back to that towards the end of this presentation. And then we have some skeptics and deniers as well. So are people worried about climate change? Yes, 2/3 are definitely concerned, which is quite similar to last year. But we also had a study in 2010 and 2011 where only 35% thought that they were worried about climate change. So it's almost doubled. So that's in 11 or 12 years' time. And it doubled people's worries. So that's something to keep in mind as well. We need to take action. And 82% of our respondents believe that climate change should be a moderate or high priority for the government, which has dropped down a little bit from last year, but it's still more than 4 out of 5 people who think that there should be a priority. So like I said, there's a whole range of emotions with climate change. A lot of people are worried. A lot of people are distressed. But that's not the only thing. There's also a minority that feel guilty or upset or even anxious, and they could be overwhelmed. And one of the people actually said, in a reply to one of the open-ended questions that Samir said, is, I'm worried we will experience food shortages and droughts. I'm worried about more floods and the health and safety of my family. So they're really concerned, and they are really taking the whole climate change and what that means to heart. So it's a very emotional issue. So it's not just, oh, it's happening, but they have a whole range of emotions that they feel when thinking about it, on what has happened to them or might happen to them in the future. So when we dissected the data a little bit and see what people thought and who had the highest level of climate change understanding or who was more in denial, there's gender differences and age differences and also voting differences. So women are more concerned than men. Elder people are less concerned than younger people, and those intending to vote for a progressive political party tend to be more understanding concerned than those that are conservatives. So, and there's some more examples as well. So it's really a difference between demographics on how people think about climate change, what their concerns are and how we should act on it. But the findings actually mirrored the 2021 survey. So how many Australians have actually been directly exposed to these potentially harmful events on circumstances, and what kind of experience did they have? Because we can all think about it, but there might be differences between people that experienced it and those who didn't. So that's important to look at as well. So first of all, exposure to potential harmful climatic events. There's another quote. The city that I live in has been blanketed with bushfire smoke for several weeks, making the city one of the worst in the world for air quality. So that's a direct impact of bushfires. And it's impacting their health, and it's impacting everything, because air quality is important for our health. So when we digged into that, we found that 37% of the new respondents personally and directly experienced at least one extreme weather or natural disaster event in the preceding year. If we looked at further back, it was 47%, so almost half of the people of the new respondents. And we also found this in 2021, that personal experience of one or more of these events made people more likely to report high levels of climate change awareness, concerns, and actions. So if you've experienced an event, you are more likely to be concerned about it. So Kerrie mentioned the floods, and this was one of the themes in our survey. Like, there were so many floods going on in 2022 that we targeted some questions specifically to those people who experienced the floods. And we wanted to know how they experienced it. So we found that 30 to 32% of the people had actual property loss. that's directly impacting them. Then on top of that, they also observed other people's misfortune events. So other people's property was damaged, or other impacts, or had a family member or close friend that was impacted. And that's only what you can see. Then you have financial losses that are not immediately visible, or psychological distress, or they were cut off from friends and family for a while. So it's not just that. So there's a quote from one of our respondents who said, "My family farm home in the countryside was totally ruined by the flood, which caused 75% damages to the whole property of 125 acres. What would you do if 75% of your home or property was flooded? How would that impact you?" Then there was also heat waves going on. So 63% of the repeat respondents experienced a heat wave in the preceding 12 months, and 36% more than once. And a quote here is that there was a record heat wave in Perth with 6 consecutive days over 40 degrees. And although they lived in a home without air conditioning, and it was extremely uncomfortable, and it led them to seek out environments with air conditioning. So they were basically fleeing their home to find some comfort to deal with the heat. And a lot of people that we asked about how they dealt with heat actually said that they had sleeping problems as a result, fatigue, dehydrations, headaches, and a lot of anxiety as well. So again, it's not just that it's uncomfortable, it has a whole lot of other emotions that were impacting them. So what does exposure to such a major climate event result in? On a personal level, greater concern and distress about climate change, and higher engagement in pro-environmental behaviors. But they also want to have governments to take more actions. So that's a more social issue. And they are supporting government action to actually combat climate change, whether it will be local or national. They want to see change. So where do Australians place the responsibility for climate action? The tendency is to accept some personal responsibility, and it's higher among those that are more progressive or those that experienced a natural disaster. We also found that non-homeowners tended to be more willing to show some personal responsibility than homeowners. So it's not that you need to have a property to want to take action. So another thing that's important for policies is to know where Australians obtain their information on climate change. So these are the top 5 sources of information on climate change that people use. And you can see commercial media, public broadcasting, their own experiences, and then Bureau of Meteorology and scientists, scientific organizations, and so on. And I've put an asterisk on the last 2 because we were not only interested in what they use as a source of information, but also what they trust the most. So the top 5 for trust only has on these 5 the last 2. So the most trusted source of information on climate change, according to the repeat respondents, was the Bureau of Meteorology. And the scientists are only on the 4th place. Media is not there. So Australians, although they see information from the media, they're more likely to trust the experts, environmental organizations, and even medical and health professionals. So this is very important to know as well if we want to target policies. So how can we communicate them to people? So have Australians' behaviors and lifestyles been affected by their understanding and experiences of climate change? In a nutshell, yes, people try to recycle more, reduce their impact, and so on. More specifically, they are using reduce, reuse, recycle. They wash their clothes in cold water, all of these things. But there's also some barriers that prevent them to do so. So they're too busy, don't have enough time, it's too expensive, or they have their own routines and it doesn't fit. So here's two surprising findings, and then I hand over to Samir again. Compared to last year, scores were higher in 2022 on pro-environmental behaviors, descriptive norms and responsibility and distress, but lower on some of the others. And there was a higher expression of hope addressing climate change among the conservatives. So Samir, back to you to see how we can use policy and practice implications.
Thanks, Karlien. So what do we do with all this data? After all, it's not just an academic exercise. We also want to learn how do we use this information to inform policy, and how can social change managers use this information to bring about change in society so that more people are willing to accept the reality and start adopting the right practices. So I would like to very quickly highlight that when we asked respondents what policies they're willing to support, these are the top 4. So strong Australian population is willing to support the government to achieve that national zero carbon emissions target by 2050. Interestingly, for me, 63 to 66% are willing to actually foot the bill and pay for that tax on carbon emissions. And then change of energy. So 59 to 62% are willing to see a phasing out of fossil fuel mines. And lastly, something that will directly impact almost all of us is that half the population is willing to drive an electric car by 2040. These are important findings. They have implications for the society. I think government bodies should definitely be paying attention to them. Although one must keep in mind that our data is showing these findings are 3 to 9% lower than what they told us in 2021. We should remember that in 2021, when we collected data, we were witnessing COP26. Elections was in air. People were talking about elections. The Teal candidates were quite active on media. Perhaps that may have influenced 2021 information, while 2022 respondents may have been influenced by floods and also COP27 and the Ukraine war. So some of these circumstances must be taken into consideration when we look at some of these findings. Very quickly, so as I said, some of these quotes are very interesting. So the first one is in capitals. It was in capital letters by the respondent, who said that we need to act now before it is too late for future generations. Some other quotes talk about how the person is happy that people voted for a government based on climate change ethos. A person asked us to look at Aboriginal cultures if we really want to look at this climate change issue. And another person said that we should be using holistic approaches. These positive quotes far outweigh the negative quotes. But I do want to give space even to negative quotes, which, as I said, is much more exciting and interesting, although it's a minority of population who is actually providing this quotes. So they talk about how there's a lot of fear mongering going on here in media, trying to scare us, or that the Australian people are taken for a ride and they're closing down industries and shunting them to another country, which is hurting the country. And finally, the last quote says, it's not just individual responsibility, companies should also be sharing their responsibility. It kind of captures in open-ended responses what Australians think what we should be doing in terms of climate action. And I would like to then end our findings by saying that if I were to take all these findings and do something about it in a behavior change setting, so these are some of the pointers. Yes, we need to continue creating awareness, but we need to go beyond fear mongering and start talking about how we can improve efficacy, how we can improve people's confidence in undertaking some of these actions. It's important to focus on solutions and not just focus on the problem. Which means that we should be targeted. So we believe that the unconvinced, the 18%ers who are not convinced that they should be taking action just now, are actually the ones who might be showing this window of opportunity for us to convince, because if we give them enough reasons, they might be open to change. And now we saw some of the barriers there, being too busy, routines, expensive. How do we address those? So I have provided some of these potential solutions. We need to provide better quality of products and services. Public transit needs to improve. If we want more people to take bus and train, for example, that's my pet peeve. We need to provide nudging strategies to shake people up, disrupt them, and take them out of their routines. We need to provide, as we see in the energy bills, the progress that they are making in terms of energy consumption. And then, yes, being expensive, government needs to come in and think of financial incentives and deterrence, especially for higher income and higher educated people, because they are more convinced to take the climate action, and perhaps they are able to do it. And the last 2 points, sorry, it's getting cut off, is we need to make this new behaviors popular by bringing social influence and community leaders to bear. So what are some of the next steps in next few days? As I said, in next 15 days, you will see the summary report come out, much more information that we have provided here today. We will go deeper into our analysis and implications. And as we speak, we have started to work on our round 3 of data to add on more insights to our national survey. We invite you to collaborate in many ways. If you want to collaborate with us on the round 1 and round 2 surveys, happy to work with you to provide and create blogs, reports, journal articles. And then if you all wanted to collaborate with us for round 3 onwards, we welcome if you want to add any questions to our survey, if you want to boost sample for specific geographies or specific audiences. Of course, it comes with some monetary responsibility, but we are happy to lay it out there that we have a wonderful opportunity to learn more about Australia. With those few words, I'll now invite Bela Stantic to talk about big data analytics. Thank you.
Thank you, Samia. I'm Professor Bela Stantic. I'm Director of Big Data Analytics within Climate Action Beacons, but also I'm founder and Director of Big Data and Smart Analytics Lab at Griffith University, which made multiple headlines around the world for my bold and correct prediction of almost everything. In case you didn't come across and you don't know me, I am that professor who predicts all elections. US election, 49 out of 50, all seats in federal election, Brexit, UK election, everything. But I'm particularly proud that I and my Big Data Lab helped all levels of government with our modeling predictions and everything during the pandemic, for what Big Data Lab and I were named public health champions. So I'm saying this not to talk about our and my achievement, but to showcase what is the power of this big data analytics using open source intelligence. Because all these projects are relied on open source intelligence, vastly on different sources of social media. So today I will tell about what we have done and how we built this big data dashboard, climate action beacon dashboard. I will talk a little bit how we achieved, what is the technology, what can be seen, and you will be able to go there and see it's live on the climate action. I will. Samia mentioned about COP conference. We also analyzed data for COP26 and COP27, so relevant social media, and there are some interesting correlations I will briefly mention. And I will complete my presentation how actually we plan now to merge together this valuable deep insight from this survey with our big data analytics. So this is how it looks like. I will come back later with all details. If you want, you can scan the QR code. It will take you to this dashboard on Climate Action Beacon website. So there are different aspects. I will talk in many pages later. But before we go into details, I will get back with QR code. So just to tell you, to indicate how many people are actually assessed with this. Samir mentioned that there's 4,000 people assessed. In this case, potentially it reached 160 million non-necessary units. So that we have over 400,000 posts, which we collected from 1st January of 22 from sent from Australia. We identified 28 different terms. Professor Brendan Mackey also helped us to narrow down the most important, in addition to the CO2, bushfire, climate change, and other things. We also collected comments on the post, because sometimes post it's sent by organization, but it's not that valuable. How much are valuable if you have 1,000 comments? And what is even more important, how I predict elections, because in Florida, poll said that Biden is winning with 4%. I said Trump, I said on Sky News night before election, Trump is winning Florida with 3.2%, and he actually won with 3.1. So I can predict with the decimal point accuracy. And why? Because I had 30 million posts from Florida, which means that I assessed that majority of population. So that is what I'm saying, that its volume not just indicate there is a significant attention toward the climate change in Australian public, but also that the results, what we have, reflect the reality. I'm ready to say that based on all these correct predictions, what I made. So these election predictions are just test beds for algorithms and methods that we develop. So I don't see it anymore as a challenge to predict it. So very few technical details for audience and people who wants to know. So we mostly rely in this case on Twitter, social media, using academic level of API, which is application programming interface. Data are in a JSON format, therefore we store it in a NoSQL MongoDB database. Later we process that data, and to ensure fast access, we store it in relational data. So you can see that there is a lot of metadata which are valuable. For example, a description that user provide in their profile. Someone says retired lawyer, and someone says student studying. We train this deep neural network, and whatever you say, I predict with 90% accuracy things. And a similar way, we predict as well age of people. So what all analysis we perform as part of this dashboard, there is many more what we are doing, but we did not incorporate it due to the privacy. So we couldn't incorporate all the network. We build the network, find influential users who can influence the people, and others who can transmit the information very fast to the wide community. So that is very important aspect. Unfortunately, due to privacy, we don't have it here. So that first of all, spatial analysis. If you enable your GPS, I know exactly on what seat you are sitting in, and if you tweet. So it's with centimeter point accuracy. But regardless of that, even if you disable GPS, we did on million posts, I can predict with 1 kilometer accuracy where you are in the world, depending when you post, who you follow, who follow you, and other things. So we train the network. So, but in addition, you mentioned when you open your account, where is your location? In many cases, people say Queensland or Australia, but a lot of people say even suburb. Temporal analysis, we can see how the volume is changing over the time. And we noticed that in the social media, people can pay attention to only to one thing. Samia mentioned that when it's election, everyone talks about election. When it's when it was bushfires, I think in 21 at the beginning of year, volume of traffic related was incredibly fast. When pandemics hit, climate change topic completely saturated down. And now it's picking up again. So in addition, we analyze what sentiment exists in not just positive and negative, but also what is polarity on -1 to +1. We also identify what emotions, is it fear, joy, surprise, anticipation, etc. I already mentioned that likes and retweets also indicate, and it's valuable to see what is your interest and what you are supporting. Likes are very important as well for elections. Right? So if it's some clear tick all, when I was on TV, I said it was mathematical certainty, because eventually it was just adding up the numbers. Right? I was quoted in a federal parliament. They said it was, Morrison said it's miracle. I said, no, it was not miracle. It was mathematical certainty. I gave interview on Thursday before the election. So additionally, topics what are discussed. So we trained this large language model, similar like ChatGPT, I will show you, to identify things. I already mentioned that predicting the age, and what is important that on this dashboard, everything you can analyze the data and filter by date, topic, sentiment, location. Most of have this kind of filters. So that this is first is a temporal, spatial, and age analysis. So you can see interestingly that vast, the majority people are between 30 and 45 who talk. There is an unknown that is due to several reasons. If people did not provide any information in their description, which is not that many, but there are institution, government bodies, so our methods identify it's not person but institution, and therefore it says unknown. So that you can see here, unfortunately, it starts from January, but fortunately as well, because it was tenfold bigger in January 21 when was the bushfire. And also you can see what are the locations. Another, let's see how I go. Sentiment analysis. So we predict this is average per day, but you can narrow it down. We did analysis for floods for the Queensland government and the New South Wales government as well, where we analyze even sentiment per day, and also to identify who are the bodies that people trust for information, evacuation, and other things as well. So, but in this case, this is average per day. Now, what is also interesting, what we noticed in 21, when pandemics kicked in, that the sentiment from negative went to neutral. Eventually, people stopped to care too much. Obviously, because people in general, when they have one crisis, forget about other. Oops. I mentioned emotional analysis, trust here. If I have time, I will do some demonstration. We will see that depending on different states, trust and fear is changing. And also, I noticed that more recent, trust is increasing and other reducing. So I think that's probably as a result because pandemics are behind us. Now people are opening to other issues. Likes and topic analysis. So as I said, we trained these large language models. We did annotation. Even Professor Brendan was involved to define the topics, and all of in the climate action briefing help with annotated 100 tweets, which we used as a template later and annotated additional students 10,000 tweets. So we trained the model and to predict what is actually people talking. And that when you narrow down by day, you can see how it's actually changing depending on daily situation, news, and other things as well. I said we are analyzing comments as well, which are very valuable, and their emotions and so on. But I'm sure, do I have 10 minutes? Then maybe I can quickly just go. So this is a climate action on the Climate Action Beacon website. If you follow from the main page, there is a link, and then you can do different things. For example, I can say that what is the state? It's Queensland. So the vast majority of poverty in Queensland comes from Brisbane area, which is not much of surprise, right? And as I said, in many cases, this in the middle is not regional. It's basically that people did not say that what is there, they just said. In a similar way, all right, but I will quickly, I will not go further. So what is interesting, just I will show, I was just told it's not sharing online, so I will not then talk too much about this. But this is what I wanted to show you. Look at trust and fear. If I restrict now to more recent, you can see that trust is coming back. That's most important. And I think I probably should go back now to slides. But you have a QR code in your, you have a link as well on the Climate Action Beacon. You can go there and play with it to find the details that you want. So I said that we also, there is a dashboard for COP26 and COP27, so you can analyze it as well, following the links on the Climate Action Beacon. But what is interesting that for COP26, there was about 4 times, 5 times almost more posts than to COP27. Samia mentioned that was the time when was election. There was a lot of party politics. Also, there was much more engagement of people. You see that there is almost 10 likes per post, and COP27 it's only 3. Sentiment-wise, it's pretty much similar. However, this 0.06 it's significant in our numbers. So it's more positive support in COP27. What also interesting that followers it's much higher than the for COP27, which indicates that some big players took the actions by tweeting, retweeting, and commenting, etc. Because a lot of it was election year, and it was obviously a lot of politics. What is important that climate policy plays the main role as a topic in COP27. So that this actually indicates what I already said, that social media reacts to the current issues. And if it's election, obviously it's opening. So the last part, what I want to show is actually what is our plan for future. So we are planning now to merge this data, this qualitative data from Climate Action Survey with our big data analytics. So we are in process of training the large language model, similar like ChatGPT. You will see. I have my ChatGPT, which I started building in 2016 before OpenAI existed. So I asked the question, even this time, what for city of two Australian public has toward the climate change? And my system, which is trained on publicly available data, not yet fine-tuned with the survey, said the Australian public has a relatively positive attitude toward the climate change and is generally supportive to policies and progress and so on. So I will just, I created video as well, recorded when I was asking that. Ninety 2% of households reporting that they have made some changes to their practices to reduce their carbon footprint. And finally, it is worth noting that the level of support for climate change policies and programs can vary depending on the context and the specific issue. In general, however, as a country with a large and diverse population, Australia has a strong reputation for taking action to address climate change and to protect its environment. So this is a large language model which learned from available data, publicly available data. As I said, what we are planning as a next step, take a survey from 21, 22, and 23, this qualitative data, and fine-tune this model. And then you will have a window on a Climate Action Beacon website where you go and ask questions, and it will answer you in a similar way. Same as the ChatGPT. With one advantage, because ChatGPT is trained with data from 2021. You cannot ask. This is trained last week, and it will be discontinued training. So before I conclude, I just would like to acknowledge that Griffith University in 2016-17 recognized that data science and big data analytics is next big things. And we recruited quite a few young world-class data scientists and clustered around me. So my work heavily rely on their works as well. So I take maybe sometimes too much credits, but we work together. So there is also, I have quite a few researchers working with me and my PhD student. There are different project groups. And I just told Brendan today when I was preparing, we didn't have a photo, so we took photos. So in next my talks, I will put as well Climate Action Weekend Group project. And last, in addition to people from Climate Action Beacon, in addition to my researchers working on my project, there are people that should be acknowledged. First of all, Dr. Jinian Chan, better known as Emily, who worked over the years on the project, and she started actually this dashboard for COP and analysis. Dr. Ranju Mandal, who worked also on this language model and deep learning. In addition, Tina, who actually almost completely developed this last Climate Action Beacon dashboard. But in addition to this, there are also people who are silent, who work in the background, and if everything works fine, we don't notice them. This is a technical support people. Daniela, who helped deploying it online, refreshing. Anthony Tyson, who is doing administration of my big data cluster, doing miracles, and also Kupa, who ensured that it's refreshing and other things as well. So thank you for your attention.
Well, I'm just going to make a few kind of comments by way of summary and conclusion, and then I'll hand back to Kerrie to close the event. But something I've found really interesting that was discovered by both these two pieces of research, the Longitudinal National Climate Action Survey and the big data analysis of social media, focusing on tweets, and which is continuous, but also we also target particular events at the Climate Action Beacon. And I think it's something new, and that is that Australians, however you measure and sample what they're, and again, you put all of those together, we've got this insight into what Australians are thinking and feeling and what they're concerned about and what they're experiencing. And Australians, and a really high percentage of Australians, have made this connection, are making this connection between extreme weather events and climate change and what we now accept as human-forced climate change. And that's actually new, because until very recently, the scientific view was that these things have yet to be connected, that the extreme weather events we experience in Australia by way of heat waves and floods and bushfires and storms, of course, they're related to climate change, but we can't say that they can be attributed to human-forced climate change. Well, Australians are telling us that they understand or are experiencing them to be connected, and that's now fully validated by the science. By the most recent IPCC Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change 6th Assessment Report that I was one of the coordinating lead authors for. I was in Working Group 2, which looks at impacts, vulnerability and adaptation. Working Group 1 is about the physical science of climate change, and Working Group 3 is about mitigating greenhouse gas emissions. So one of the conclusions from Working Group 1 is that what we call the increase in climate trends, the increase in global warming, rising sea level, the changing rainfall patterns, that rising those changing global trends, in particular the rising global temperature, is driving an increase in the frequency and duration and intensity of all extreme weather events, and in particular those we experience in Australia. So I find it very interesting that the science has just very recently, in the last 12 months, confirmed that we indeed can attribute this observed increase in weather extremes to human-forced climate change, and that this actually echoes and is also validated by the lived experiences of Australians, that are being captured and articulated through these two social science approaches. And I'll just finish by noting that in our Working Group 2 IPCC report, for Australia and New Zealand, we identified what we call key regional climate risks. So climate risks they're like risks. Risks are the likelihood and consequences of something of value being impacted by a hazard. So in the case of a climate risk, we're talking about something we value, the risk to something we value being impacted by a climate hazard, and the exposure of the thing or the system or the person or the community, whatever it is, to that hazard and its vulnerability. And an obvious one is heat waves. We know that climate change is making heat waves worse. We saw that heat waves are one of the extreme events that Australians are experiencing and that they're worried about, and that they understand that's being driven by global warming. But what also the results show, which the science is also confirming, that because of that increase in frequency and duration, these climate risks are overlapping. And we actually identified two new classes of risks that relate to this now established connection between rising climate extremes and rising climate trends, warming, and rising weather extremes. And it was number 8. There were nine climate risks. I won't read all 9. Makes for depressing reading. But risk 8 was cascading, compounding and aggregate impacts on cities, settlements, infrastructure, supply chains and services due to extreme weather events. So their impacts are cascading, compounding and aggregating. And risk 9, which follows from that, is the inability of institutions and governance systems to manage rising climate risks. And I'll be very interested in, so I think we've got good evidence from the last 2 surveys and the ongoing data analytics regarding risk 8. So what I'm interested in seeing in the data analytics going forward and the 2023 survey is whether we can have some questions and analytics about risk 9, about how people feel our governance and institutions, are responding to these extreme events. So I'll stop there. Thank you, Kerrie. Back to you.
A lot of data, a lot of information for you all to bring that, I'm sure, for a long time after this event is finished. But you can see how Brendan's speaking about the regional risk 8 and 9, how we've moved into those human dimensions of thinking about climate change, and therefore how valuable it is to have these extraordinary data sets, which are, even though we've got the leaders here, are a consequence of these, especially the survey of interdisciplinary collaboration. We put 80 academics in the room and ask them what's the most important question, and you'll have some idea about the process that we've undergone to make sure that it's representative of many disciplines. Can I please ask the panelists, the presenters, to come up for some Q&A? We have I haven't got time for it.
It's 8:15.
Okay. We've got time for some questions. If there's questions online, could you please put them in the chat box? And if there are questions in the audience, can I please ask you, just so the people online can hear you, to come to this yellow line here and ask your question.
Rod Welford from, I suppose, Business School. I had so many questions. I think firstly, you congratulate all team members on the work that's been done. The data collection process and the sample is just fabulous, in both the social media and the individual surveys. So I guess the biggest question for me is, how do we act upon this data? So when I say how do we act upon this data, does the data give us enough information, or do we need to rethink what data we need to draw out of our data sources in order to determine what will move the dial in terms of action needing to be taken? What will motivate action to be taken? Because my long history of involvement in sustainability issues suggests to me that dispensing facts alone will never cut it. As important as the evidentiary base is, for those of us who believe in, anything that's remotely related to rigorous or clear thinking, the facts alone are not enough. And social media is a wonderful insight into sentiment and prejudices around that. So I guess my big question is, what's your take on how the survey helps us take the next step from what we know from the surveys, and how we devise responses or react, how we move forward from that to initiate ways of achieving change?
Thanks, Rod. Samir?
Thanks, Rod. So I am by profession a marketer. I teach marketing, and some of my colleagues here from our center called Social Marketing at Griffith. So excellent question, because that's right in my alley. This is just the starting step. This is just to understand what people are thinking, what they're doing. This gives you an insight, a peek into their lives, but that's just a starting step. So we then have to go and work with the communities. Well, one of my other projects, which I'm also working with Climate Action Beacon, is to work in the Tweedshire Council, where we are facilitating interactions between the City Council and the community, and providing the City Council a bridge of what the community is thinking through co-design workshops, through surveys, through interviews, to go deeper, a step beyond the survey, to think of solutions. What are people willing to adopt, what they are not, and what needs to be done to facilitate environments that will attract them to adopt new behavior. Okay. And then, of course, there's a framework of steps to undertake beyond that. But just to directly answer your question, I agree with you. This is a starting step.
If I may add on this one, at one of my talks once I said, don't ask data, let data tells you. And later they quoted me from many places. So that is exactly what I see that we can do with all this data and use this deep learning a lot like with model. Then intelligence within that system will be able to answer these questions based on that.
Brendan?
One of the results which you highlighted, which I find very interesting, there's this 18%. Basically, they're saying they accept that climate's changing. They largely accept that humans are helping to drive this change, but they don't see it as a climate crisis. They don't think we're currently experiencing a climate crisis, and they don't seem to even think that there could be a climate crisis coming that we should would compel them to take big changes now. Whereas the science, if you read the IPCC reports, it's replete with the phrase transformational change needed now. And transformation is just a user-friendly way of saying radical change. I don't like the word radical, it sounds too radical, but rapid transformational change is a pretty serious thing for the science-based to calling for. So there's 18% who don't see the need for transformational change now. So I think there's more. I'm interested to help dig around that data some more and to find out who are these 80% and what would motivate and how can we reach them? I mean, are they deeply religious people and just been got to go talk to their faith communities? Or whatever. So I'm agreeing with you, not just giving them the facts. There's a stack of IPC reports literally that big. No shortage of facts.
Why is that 18%? Because out there always is the social marketers to tell you leaders and laggards in change agents.
Yeah, but there's like 78% who really think it's important. 74% who think it's really important, and there's 7% in your numbers. It doesn't matter what you tell them or what they experience. They're not going to do it. They're the deniers and the skeptics. But there's 18% who it seems to me are amenable to change. They're amenable to change. So what would make them change? Is it that the information isn't being delivered to them by people they trust, or is it something more emotional, or what is it? So I think I'm interested in that 18% because that's a big demographic, big chunk of Australia.
Karlien, did you have anything else to?
No, I think my colleagues have covered most of it. So yeah, I think I agree with that.
I mean, it's we know one thing for sure, it won't be one thing.
Yeah.
You know, and I think part of the benefit of having such a broad scoping survey and data is that it allows you to look at the data, slice and dice it in different ways that will suit different purposes, different organisations, different places, and different people in different ways, and that's what we need for sure. We've got it.
Seems to me that the way to change the big things is the government and law, essentially, not the population as such, although the population may hold a clue to the government doing something and law, right? But another thing I personally think is that people can only imagine what they have. There's a limit of imagination, not necessarily will. And part of the reason why people are so, I believe, is so just like letting it happen. We're worried. We'll do what we can in our home. We'll change our preferences. They don't see. They can't imagine how something big could happen. Right? I can't imagine actually, but I would like to imagine. But it seems to me that it's got to involve government and got to involve law, and it's the same with kind of AI and major technological transformations. So I wonder whether we can take some proactive action, which is trying to get towards government and law into public discourse. Because when people demand the government does something and the government, party politics, etc., that's where the biggest change is. We have a different government to the one we had before, right? If we had different laws, and we change a lot of things. So yeah, that's just my thing, and I'm doing it now, trying to repeat the words government and law as much as possible. Thank you.
I can just kick off that.
Well, I just want to hear what your reactions are, because like I do believe that you've got the start, right?
Yeah.
And so therefore, what do you make of that kind of proposition?
Yeah. So I mean, I'll just start that response. So I think that there's this issue of social license and political will, and we've the last federal election, we saw a lot more social license expressed, or in effect, we saw a lot of votes, going for climate action. That's the bottom line. So, you know, yes, we need governments to move, and we need new stronger laws, etc. But they need to be. I would argue there needs to be that social license there. That political will come from having a broad base of Australian society that wants climate action. So one of the things that we can do with both these data sources, information sources, is identify quite finely grained, social analysis of where the resistance is, where the deniers are, where the skeptics are, in which electorates is this 18%, and who are and who are the influencers, etc. So, I agree with you. We need government. We need systemic changes. We need leadership by government. I will point out very quickly, because I don't want to hog the whole answer here, that if you go back, it's only about 5 years, we got virtually none of our grid was powered from clean energy. It was hydro. And in the last, and if you look, you can go online now, there's a website that tracks it in real time. In the middle of the day, it's 60%. Right? 60%, about 30% from solar PV and about 30% from wind. And at night, it gets down to about 35%. It's mainly hydro and wind and batteries, because obviously the solar drops out. So on average, it's just under 50%. That's happened in basically 5 years with basically no federal government leadership. So, imagine. So again, getting back to people imagining change, we've actually seen massive change in 5 years. We just haven't had, people don't know that fact. But I agree with you. People need to see that fast change is possible, and we certainly need governments to act.
Should I go?
Yeah. Oh.
I agree with you, but I don't want governments to work in isolation. And that has been the big problem, is governments sitting in Canberra, Brisbane, and the capital cities make up their own opinions and shove down their policies down our throat. What's important is, yes, governments should come into action, but in consultation with the communities. And so it has to be, and I think I'm building upon your point, which is governments must act now, as one of the quote suggested, but it has to be in consultation with the community. We cannot just let governments take the baton and drive without taking the community along with them. And let me also add that they are not the only two pillars in the society. We cannot ignore the corporations who contribute handsomely to greenhouse gas emissions.
If I may add, government will follow what people want, because there are elections. So if people make their voice, I am sure that government will make it law and policies which will follow.
I also think that, yes, we need to reach the policymakers and the government, but I hope that with the survey and with the big data, we can actually present more plans to the government and say, okay, this is what people feel is needed. This is how we can communicate things. Because as you saw in the presentation, that where people get their information from is substantially different than what they trust. So how can we effectively communicate in a way that people trust us, and also that the government can then reach public? So it is, we need to start that conversation, but there are certainly aspects in all of the data we presented that we can start with and take that as a starting point and continue to gather more data, like they're already doing in the tweet chart.
I've got time for 2 more questions. Vicky, did you have a question? And there's one online, so we might do the one online while we're waiting for Vicky. The question is from Leona Murphy. Hi, Leona. To build on this first question and be specific on the difference industry and corporate enterprise can make, what would you hope industry and corporates would do with your findings and what role do you think they can play?
As a person from Griffith Business School, I think companies can make a big difference. I just heard the interview of the CEO of Shell on CNBC this morning, and he was talking about how they are investing heavily on the green energy resources. So first thing is they should and they can, with their huge capitals available to them, invest in the right resources. They have the resources, and now there are options available that they can do it. Number two, I'm just now rattling off some of the lists that I can think of. They can actually create the right quality products and services. That is their business. I do not want governments to provide soap and shampoo. It is corporations' business. They should be cognizant of what makes sense from a green perspective. There is demand for it in the community, and big companies like Unilever should start getting into providing those products and services. And number three, I'll end after this, is corporate social responsibility. It's a loose term. It is interpreted in many ways. I understand that there's a lot of debate on it. However, there's no choice. Now they don't have a choice. They have to start becoming part of the community and start solving the problem rather than addressing it. So the CSR budgets can start getting into those directions.
Yeah.
And more about the survey and the big data analytics.
Yeah, so I think that, the big organisations and companies, including cooperatives like RACQ, but for-profit corporations should take note of the results, right? I mean, if you've got 74% of the Australian adult population saying they want climate action, I mean that's a lot of your whatever good or service you're trying to sell people. That's a lot of Australia who will look kindly upon you or favourably upon you, if you are taking climate action in some way. So I would have thought this is very useful information, marketing information for companies, but also for helping them formulate their long-term strategies about where their company's going in a low carbon climate, a low carbon economy that has to be climate resilient. The majority of Australians, that's what they want. That's what they want.
And a lot of them, to continue on that, a lot of people feel personal responsibility to act upon climate change. So if they can convince the corporate businesses to actually, by buying more sustainable products, that they have to move that direction, that's also a way that we can target things. So, yeah.
And with the summary report for policy and decision making that will be released, full report, you've got a glimpse of that tonight. That's absolutely geared towards us thinking what will be useful for industry, for corporates, for governments in planning their own climate action. There's a longer technical report, but the summary report for policy and decision making is about trying to influence those conversations. And as Brendan and Karlien said, take notice of the results because, it's a reflection of what's happening in the Australian public. And Bela?
Yeah, I just wanted, I had one project which looked actually on the stock value of companies which are supporting climate action or opposing. And that's interesting finding. Also, another project, what we are looking for accommodation, hotels, if they are sustainable, what is their occupancy and what is their reviews and everything. That project results are not yet out. So that obviously that people, as I said, people will influence this corporation, it will influence government and these hotel chains and everything to be sustainable or climate action.
Okay, thank you. Vicky?
Hi, I'm Vicky Martin. I'm a social scientist at Mosaic Insights, but also an adjunct senior fellow at Kew. Wondering, I've got two very quick questions. One is, you mentioned that the survey data is biased in age, so obviously younger people are underrepresented. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on maybe other groups that are underrepresented in the survey and what we can do about, tackling reaching some of those groups in this sort of work. And the second one is, particularly over the last 5 years, we're seeing increasing problems with survey fraud in panels and through direct lengths. So what did you experience in that? Our recent survey, a national survey that was publicly available, got 400 out of 500 responses from overseas blogs. So it's a big issue in survey data. But we're seeing it in these survey panels too. And as you know, through machine learning, it's getting harder and harder to detect. So just wondering if you can share some insights on that too.
I can answer part of it and then you can continue. So we've done data quality checks on all of the data that we collected to make sure that people are not just filling things out for the sake of filling it out, because they get a small reward after filling it out because it's a panel. So we do data quality checks with preset criteria, and we're very strict on those. We had 13 quality checks.
And we have more, but 13 was.
Yeah. So we go through all of that data, and that is after the company that we use already did a lot of deleting of unuseful data as well. So there's a very stringent process. I don't think we checked for the panelists in Australia. We know that. So overseas data was not an issue as far as I know.
Well, we don't know.
No, exactly.
But yeah, we like the 13 checks included attention checks. We went back and forth, looked at the trends, the averages, and saw the trends across demographics and compared them with 2021. So we believe that we did our due diligence and the company has done their job.
We also had a question in there twice to make sure that people would respond to that question in the same manner, not like opposed in one section of the survey and then. So we're trying to make sure that the data is actually representative. Right?
Yeah, so I want to use it. So.
Yeah, we want to use it and we want it to be representative of Australians. So yeah.
So about your first question about the bias, just to be clear that we believe the 31% repeat sample of 22 was 9 to 10 years older than the national population. But the remaining 69% is representative of the population. But there is value, as you know, in getting repeat data because you can then see the trends over the next 2 years. So yeah, it comes with checks and balances, the positives and negatives. We want them to participate, but it also teaches us that people who really care about climate change tend to participate, and that's the bias I was talking.
And yeah, the other thing is that obviously it's only for adult Australians. Yeah. So it's always higher than the national average because that includes the underage.
And in the case of social media, obviously, because we just collect data posted from Australia. So that, and in relation to age distribution, it's a regular distribution because according to population on Twitter. But we know that this AI is surpassing human abilities, so it's a big challenge, but we have methods to identify which are the bots and everything. When I was helping Operation COVID Shields, I also identified significant proportion intentionally damaging posts sent from our overseas. So that will be always the case.
I'm afraid that's all we have time for tonight. Thank you for the question. But before we go to some thank yous, big thank you to Natasha Hennessy, who is actually behind here. And big thank you to all our wonderful researchers and the presentations tonight. Thanks very much. For Griffith, for the Climate Action Beacon, that was a good idea. That was a good idea. And to, of course, all of you for coming along tonight. Thank you for making the time, and please do reach out. And I'll see you outside for some drinks and canapes, and everybody at home in their UGG boots can retire to. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Excellent.